part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's quick hitting local insight after every game you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate, and the Hawks Postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So at the end of the first quarter and the end of the second, it seemed manageable. That pesky third quarter, though, we'll talk download on that. And first, let's talk takes on how the Hawks got ruptured in a 138-118 loss to the Toronto Raptors tonight. And Tate, you kept it simple and said it was the combinations that hurt the Hawks.
A combination of two things, Tenitra. First of all, happy opening night. Glad to be back with you again for another season. Yes. Breaking down all the Hawks action after every single game. But I think the worst thing right out the gate from tip ball was what the Hawks could not afford to do, which was, number one, I feel like in some instances get a little bit caught up in the emotions of opening night. And then number two, being that, and I know it may seem easy to say this, and I know everybody's professionals and so on and so forth, any given night and all that other stuff, but underestimating the opponent just a little bit. May have been looking a little bit too much at the front of the jerseys to see the Raptors and where they may have finished last year, the acquisitions from last year, but guys get better, obviously. The Hawks being one of those teams, probably the most discouraging thing to me during this entire game is all the points in the paint and being out-rebounded and all these other things, especially on the offensive end. You know how I feel about that. And you have is it the biggest team or the third big? No, you have the third youngest team. You have the biggest team by roster in the NBA. That was a little bit discouraging to see tonight.
Yeah. I have to agree with you on a couple things. First and foremost, as you mentioned, just points in the paint. I mean, it was just a diabolical difference. 86-56 Raptors outshining the Hawks inside. And then one of the things that you kind of dig into as well is, and I kind of looked at this, right? When I was in the arena, I'm looking for my goggles or my goggles. And so I'm like, okay, let me see if maybe I'm missing something. Like it felt like in the gym, the binoculars. It felt like in the gym, the Raptors were like 10 feet, like every player was 10 feet taller than the opposing player for the Hawks. That's right. Just felt like they were playing bigger, if you will, the entire game. It felt like they were playing bigger for all 94 feet. It felt like they were playing bigger at both ends of the court. Mm-hmm. And I did find that to be problematic. But for me, my take on it was Toronto's offense on the break was just diabolical. And the Hawks defending it just not so much. I don't want to see, when I'm thinking about fast break, right? And I'm looking at, again, another one of these numbers that's just unbelievable. 34 points to just 11 fast break points for the Hawks. And it's actually two things. So I want to talk about it from the Raptors perspective on their fast break, but I also want to talk about it from the Hawks perspective as well. So when I kind of look down, at the numbers with the Raptors, and I'm looking at the fact that, hey, every 4 possessions, this team is basically running in transition, right? And the Hawks defense oftentimes was stagnant trying to catch up. Now, if it was half court and they were able to set their D, fine, DeShaun, no problems. I felt like the Hawks were solid in that regard. But if by chance there was an opportunity for the Raptors to go on the break, if the Hawks, first of all, weren't doing a darn thing in terms of second chance points, only 8 offensive rebounds, only 16 second chance points. And that was because every ball seemed to bounce to the Raptors and they were off and running. So I think that part was problematic from the Raptors side of the court. But the other side was, for me, I felt like the Hawks were just a step slow. And I couldn't figure out why, when they like to push the ball, why this team was kind of playing as slow of a pace as they were. Granted, we're going to say this throughout this broadcast, and probably for a couple broadcasts. We're talking about a team just like the Raptors, granted, but we're talking about a team in the Hawks that, hey, this is game 1, right? And so for the most part, you're trying to figure it out, right? You've got Reece Shea Johnson, Porzingis, Daniels, Young. That's your starting five. But if you kind of look at that starting five, you could kind of say that's a new starting five, right? Because obviously Kristaps Porzingis not there last year. Obviously Jalen Johnson not there for about 6 good months of the year. So it is kind of like a new look offense that probably needs to take an opportunity to gel, kind of figure out where Zachary Risachet going to find his footing. Jalen Johnson just coming back. You kind of want to see where is he? Is he at 100% heading into all-star status type Jalen Johnson that we saw before the injury last season, or no? What about Dyson Daniels? And then, of course, Trae Young being Trae Young. So on the one hand, it was a little bit frustrating because this is a team that we know can push the pace. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, okay, they are, for all intents and purposes, trying to kind of find their identity.
Well, speaking of 6 good months, though, Tenitra, and I heard you mention that there, they've only had 6 good months to try and figure this thing out, how to try and stop some offenses. You got to be able to stop the ball at the top of the key, for crying out loud. That's something that they haven't been able to do. I mean, when you look at in this game, in which this was actually something that I thought was going to be very key for them tonight, was the perimeter defense, stopping the ball at the top of the key, because Toronto's 3, I guess, primary ball handlers between RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and Scotty Barnes, all of those guys are guys that really just put their head down, drive to the basket, only have one gear. That's level 5, by the way, and took advantage of that completely at the Atlanta Hawks. And then you start thinking about the optimism that we have with the Atlanta Hawks this year, having a 7-footer by size, you know, a center by size, and all that kind of stuff, having somebody like a Kristaps Porzingis in the middle. That didn't seem to matter very much to the offense of the Toronto Raptors. They didn't even give that a second thought. You got to imagine that that would probably be on the blueprint for the opposing teams coming up. Remember, it's only game number 1, so there is, I believe, that very fine line that you draw in the sand between pushing the panic button and, hey, we need to get this kind of figured out here because it is only game 1. Don't push the panic button because it's only game 1, but also get it together because this is game 1.
Yeah, and going back to what you mentioned about that perimeter defense, oddly enough and interestingly enough, most of those shots for the Raptors came on the right side of the key. So they kind of kept going back.
I like that analysis.
Yeah, so to the well. So I think that's one of the things that I was kind of watching throughout the game, like, okay, where are they spotting up for these threes, right? And they kept going to that end. So, you know, whomever has your hot hand that particular night, it's your responsibility to kind of make sure that's where you bring the help defense. Because oftentimes when I would see them set for that shot, I didn't see anyone bringing help defense on it. So that's something that the Hawks are going to have to figure out, because as you mentioned, they got a little bit better as the season kind of wore on last year. But we know that if we had to point out 2 things, and we'll point out the other thing in the next seg, but if there are 2 things we have to point out, certainly is that leaky perimeter defense that was just pesky again. And like you, my take on it was about the transition defense, but my honorable mention was that perimeter D, because again, we looked at, for example, if I'm like kind of looking at the stats and kind of figuring out some things of, hey, how did it go so wrong? That was definitely one area, because I remember looking at the stats after the first quarter and thinking, okay, you've got the Raptors shooting like 53% from the field. You got them shooting like 44% from 3. But there were little upticks that I saw at the end of the quarter that made me think, okay, maybe, possibly, maybe there's something good. But ultimately speaking, then the second quarter happened. Same thing I thought at the end of the second quarter. Saw a little uptick, and then we know what happened from there. But I think there were some underlying issues and some underlying challenges as well. This Hawks team, when we start talking about kind of the makeup of the team and kind of what it is that we're accustomed to seeing with them, one of the things that they are really, really good at is distributing the ball. And eventually they got to 25 assists, but I think that number is still a little bit telling, DeShaun, because I think that doesn't tell the entire story. Because in the first half, I really did not see ball distribution and ball movement like I'm accustomed to with them.
I think the last thing for me on top of all of this is, you know, trying to find a little bit of silver lining in this. reality is the Toronto Raptors and many other teams are probably not going to come out as hot as they did, shooting like 56 or something like that percent from the field.
Sure.
That's very unlikely is going to happen. And then Trey, at the same time as Dyson, at the same time as this guy, that guy, are not all going to have the type of games together collectively as a unit in which they put on the floor on tonight. So I mean, obviously there's some kinks that they have to work out. I think that's stating the obvious, some wrinkles that they have to iron out amongst one another. We will see instances where they do that. We will see instances, if I'm just being really honest about how I feel about this team this year, where we will see some of the same things that we saw on tonight during times of the season where we shouldn't be seeing that anymore. But ultimately, I think the main thing is just to not allow this to carry over into a very interesting back-to-back that's going to be coming up this weekend.
Yeah, because otherwise you have the same situation that we saw at the end of this half and the beginning of the second half. We'll talk about that when we come back. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by PrizePicks, brought to you by Build, and brought to you by Monarch. So every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. So you got to love how quick it is, and they just added stacks to PrizePicks. So if you want to ride with a player, select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup, you can do it. And it's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with one click, which is a really cool thing. So be sure that you download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup for PrizePicks. And listen to this. There's a special max discount promotion live on the board right now. So make sure you check that out if you will. Again, that's PrizePicks, code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups. It's good to be right. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by Build. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines and future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. And you got to love that with Built, your rent finally works for you. I mean, you're earning points every month on something you already have to pay, and it has made everyday life feel more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA, and make sure to use that link so they know we sent you. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by Monarch. Let's be honest. Most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth between 401ks, savings, investments. It's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. It's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments without having to touch a spreadsheet. And I love that I can review everything with my partners, see our shared goals, make better financial decisions together. And Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where my money's going and how to make it work harder for me. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. So DeShaun, a 6-point deficit at halftime ballooned to a 23-point blowout, and that was the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So, DeShaun, when you look back at this game, and you kind of alluded to it in your Tate's Take, so we're going to revisit that, if you will. But yeah, when you kind of look at this game, I know, again, I go back to the first quarter, very manageable. Go back to the second quarter, and the Hawks ended that quarter on an 11-3 run, cut the deficit to 6. And then all of a sudden, that pesky third quarter happened. Literally, the Raptors went on a 29-9 run that actually went into the fourth quarter. They outscored the Hawks 45-28 in the third quarter, and that was really where the game turned.
It was, and I mean, I remember feeling like, okay, well, this can't really get any worse, right? I know that we talk about the Hawks having a history of third quarter issues, right? Again, shocker. That isn't just something I feel like stemmed over from last year, but also from the year before. And if we're just being honest, the year before, and if you've been living under a rock and you weren't here in Atlanta or paying much attention to the Hawks the year before, then you would know that it also happened the year before. This is just something that's just been going like an ongoing thing, even though despite that there has been changes to front office, there's been changes amongst players that has been recycled. There has been changes to coaching staffs. Just for whatever reason, it just seems like the third quarter kind of rears its ugly head on the Atlanta Hawks all over again. I don't know really what that's about. But just, as unfortunate as it was to be a team that was outscored 47-28 in one quarter, by the way, of all teams, yes, still being the Toronto Raptors. That part is probably more discouraging than just the performance of the other people, because it felt like it was a lack of effort. I understand that there are some instances where teams are hitting shots and it's like I always say, throwing a rock in the ocean from the boat. It's almost as if it can't hit. It's impossible to hit land or anything else. It's impossible. It's like shots weren't even hitting the rim. But you also had guys that were contributing big for that team, being Toronto, like Sandro Mamukelishvili, trying saying that last name 3 times fast, and just guys that you didn't really anticipate. I mean, it was like Toronto was just in a groove. Yeah. Right. It was just almost as if they were more in sync than the Hawks. They were more ready for the Hawks. And that's not even talking about coming out of the gate for the game. We're also talking about when those adjustments are supposed to be made in the locker room at halftime and in some of those huddles. It doesn't feel like that's what happened at all. And Toronto, you got to give credit to, because it just picked up where they last left off.
Yeah. And I think that's the tough part, because you'd like to think that when it comes to halftime conversations, and you're closing out on an 11-3 run, and you get a lead that was about 13 down to 6, that, hey, this is manageable. And then the bottom kind of falls out again. And you mentioned it, and I kind of want to go back to it. The frustration of how it fell out is our other term that has kind of followed us through 3 seasons together, is the RRP, the random role player. Grady Dick, Sandro Mamukelishvili.
Not this again.
Yeah, like exactly. So that's something that I think when I look at, and bench play from the Hawks wasn't bad. It's just that once again, the bench play from the opponent was just so much better. So when I'm looking down the stat line and I see 10 points from Sandro, and that was in the third quarter, by the way. How is he outscoring everybody in the third quarter? So that's the problem I have, where like the adjustments being made. And then, of course, Grady Dick had himself a nice second quarter. So I think that is where kind of the biggest challenge for me is as well, when we talk about those third quarter adjustments. If there's somebody out there who looks like he has the hot hand, who is not a starter, that needs to be something that the Hawks get after. And if you got to put your best man on him just to slow him down and not get that RRP to be the one that beats you, then do what you got to do. But we want to end show 1 for game 1 of the season on a high note. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about that real quick. The fact that of all of the not so good things that happened tonight, a really, really good thing happened for the Hawks tonight. And that is that after 9 months of being out because of a torn labrum, shoulder surgery, just a bad look, as Jalen Johnson was making his way towards all-star status, he came back tonight with a vengeance. We typically call him Mr. Double-Double. He was about 2 assists and 3 boards shy of actually a triple-double. Ends the night on 22 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists, and 35 minutes of play. So welcome back, one.
It was just really good to see Jalen Johnson back out there again, and not only just out there, but beyond looking like he's out there to get exercise and reps and get back into game speed. We talked about how the Toronto Raptors how the Toronto Raptors came out of the halftime break and kind of looked like that they hadn't skipped a beat and nothing really changed. That's kind of how it looked for Jalen Johnson from the last time that we saw him. We talk about his injuries and so forth. It's really, really tough, not just physically, but also mentally when you're already coming off of a year prior that you had some injury issues. Sometimes that can kind of be tough to deal with from a mental standpoint. Sure. It was good to see him go out there and feel like he was the old Jalen Johnson again. If nobody else looked to appear like they were who we last saw them look like, then it was Jalen Johnson, which you got to imagine is a bonus for this team.
Indeed. You said he was quiet at media day. I guess he wanted his game to speak for him. The Hawks Postcast is the #1 place to hang out after every game. And remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, head over to Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.